nobody in construction doesn't want to come home at the end of the day. They want to work, they want to come home, they want to do their job. They want to get to work right away too and solve problems. They solve problems with their hands. They're building things, they're creating things. That's why they're on site. And the reality is that in health and safety, and the thing that transitioned at Tross Construction, which is the company I worked at, is that the understanding behind health and safety. So before, like when I came into the industry, it's like you're going to learn health and safety based on whatever company you first join. They're going to teach you the basics on wear hard hat, steel toe boots, don't put your finger in that light socket. And by the way, all these different things around like ladder safety, whatever, you're going to learn because I personally saw somebody really get screwed up over that, and I'm going to make sure you don't have it. And there's no real gateway to the industry, and it's crazy because you're dealing with so many different peoples with so many different backgrounds. My parents could have been rock climbers, and I might not have been scared of heights, and so my risk on a job site could have been much higher than somebody that's terrified of heights is going to have 4 points, 5 points of contact on a ladder at all times, right? And so the reality is that you're dealing with a world of new and young workers, all this other stuff, but also the reality that safety is dealing with human nature, and human nature is complacency is natural. It's how we progress as humanity, right? Like when you're driving, the best example of complacency that I give is you're driving down the highway. The next time you drive down the highway and you're going 90 miles an hour or whatever the speed limit is in the US, 100 kilometers an hour is 60 miles or something, I think. And you're going down one direction and you have a semi truck going the other, and there's a 6-inch painted line in between the two of you. And you're listening to the radio, you got one hand on the wheel, you're talking to your buddy, and there's zero fear in you. You take somebody that's 25 years old, which this is probably impossible to do, but it's never seen a car, never watched cars on TV, or never been in a car, and you put them in a vehicle and do that, they are going to be petrified. And so the reality is you should be petrified. That's incredibly scary and dangerous. You are 6 inches away from certain death. And so the reality is this happens all the time in construction. Is I worked on high-rise construction my career, and I started out being scared of heights, and I ended up not being scared of heights. And the amount of times I could tell you that I had a harness on, that I would be what we call air hooked, where you're hooked to yourself because you went to get material so many times and you just forgot to hook up to the lifeline, the lanyard, or your lifeline. And it's not that don't want to go home. It's that you don't identify risk anymore. And so you're getting yourself in these situations. And so the reality of what a paper form, or what we were trying to accomplish with a paper form, is how do you break up that complacency? How do you make people stop and think? That's what it's all about. And so this is where it even gets more complicated, is the way in which we are attempting as a safety community to break up complacency is to introduce things that make people stop and think. So forms, whether they're paper forms or digital forms, that's what we're trying to do. The first problem that I see with that is, I described this at the beginning, being in the field level of construction. Like I'm talking about the people that are building, the carpenters, electricians, drywallers, laborers. Predominantly, we are not academic people. We do not, and it doesn't mean we're not intelligent. We're highly intelligent. It just means we don't learn or absorb through academic processes. What is a paper form? It's reading, writing, and academic. And so one of the things that we battle is like, look, we're going through an evolution in this industry where safety is now being adopted in a way that I think is right. We have to start looking at it in a level of compliance, as far as like making sure that there's a system in place and the companies are proving that they're providing a safe work environment. But at the same time, we can't go down this path where it's like the safety program you put in place is there now to protect the business. You have to remember it's yes, the result should be protecting the business, but the core part of this is to ensure that you're protecting the workers. And so how can we disrupt the way that field level workers are interacting with safety to create that, to disrupt complacency, to break it up? And the reality is that becomes an ever shifting thing. The form that you gave them in week 1 turns into complacency in month 2, right? And so paper-wise, for starters, it's almost impossible, because the amount of time and effort it takes you to change a form and get it out, the amount of times that we had a form that was somebody on our, whether it was a sub trade or one of our internal team, was using a form that was literally 3 years old, and we had 6 different versions of that. It was in a binder that they found somewhere. For one, that's problem number one. Number two is that you have to have continuous creativity and impact on these forms that will create a disruptive environment for that end worker to create that breakup in complacency. And the reality of all of this is that all has to happen within a 5-minute window, or you're going to lose the worker. They're just going to pencil with it because they want to get to work. And so our vision is, how do you interact the ability to guide them through, because a part of this form is to guide them through things that they might not have thought of. Like, are you working with a new and young worker? Is somebody working above you? What is the weather? Pulling that data together, but also interjecting things like a 5-second video on ladder safety. Everyone's probably like, how can you cover anything in 5 seconds? Part of the problem with these training things is that you look at ladder safety and you're like, oh crap, these are all the things that could go wrong with ladder safety. We have to cover them all. But the human nature aspect is, you might want to cover them all, but they're not absorbing them all. So do your research as an industry. Like, we need to do our research as an industry, figure out what is the main reason for ladder injuries, and say, okay, it's not having 3 points of contact or the improper slope or whatever it is. And just make sure in 5 to 10 seconds, you make sure that when they hit, they're working on a ladder in a form, automatically a 5 or 10-second video pops up, right? They're not going to listen to a 30-second video. That's the hard truth of it. But a 5-second video could potentially save their life, right? Or they hit something, hey, I'm working with peel and stick primer. Did you know? Because, and I'll stop here. You can tell I tend to go on and on, but I will stop here. One of the things that we're trying to solve is there's so many barriers to health and safety, to having the ability to work safe. And a lot is the knowledge. Do I know that primer, for example, if I'm exposed to it without protection for an extended period of time, has a high risk of causing cancer, right? That type of information you might know if you read your 400-page safety manual. But realistically, that's not going to happen. How do you put impactful snippets in that daily work environment? The last thing I'll say is, we haven't won until a worker reaches for their phone to solve safety like they reach for a hammer to pull a nail. If they're doing it based on compliance, as in you have to do this daily, you have to do this weekly, we are losing.